Hi everyone, I'm Gina from Gina K Designs and your host of Stamp TV. Today on Stamp TV, I'm going to show you a really cool background technique using an embossing folder and embossing powder. It's kind of like embossed embossing. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need to do this project. First, you're going to need an embossing folder, and the one that I'm using is the Butterflies folder from Darice. Then you're going to need some ink, and I'm using some of the Gina K Designs Turquoise Sea and some of our white pigment ink. Then you're going to need embossing powder, and I'm using our fine detail clear powder. You're also going to need some cardstock, and for the background I'm using white cardstock, some black onyx, and then a white card base. You're also going to need a sponge dauber or some other kind of sponge applicator, and I'm using the embossing magic pad. So, to begin, you're going to take a piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to run the embossing magic pad all over this piece of cardstock so that the embossing powder only sticks where I want it and not to other areas of the card. That kind of removes the static, but it also kind of blots up any oil or debris that might be on the surface of that piece of cardstock. Now for the embossing folder, what you want to do is you want to find the part of the folder where the butterflies or whatever you're using are sticking out, where they're pushed out. So that's this side of the folder on this particular embossing folder. So what I'm going to do is I am going to run the embossing magic pad over this just to help a little bit in case there's any sticky stuff in the recessed areas. Then I'm going to take the white ink pad and I'm going to pat white ink all over the surface of this embossing folder. There we go. Now, the ink itself is not going to completely transfer, but you'll get enough of a transfer that it will work really well. All right, so I'm going to lay this down. Actually, let me put this aside for a second, and I want to get my embossing machine ready. I'm using the Cuttlebug for this one here, and you can use any embossing machine you want, but I'm going to start with an A and a B plate. Let me re-ink that a little bit just to make sure the ink is wet enough. Okay. Then I'm going to place my paper, my cardstock, onto this embossing folder and then close it up. Now I'm going to run it through using another B plate. I'm going to come back the other way. Okay, now it's very hard to see. I mean, even up close when you're looking right at it, it's very hard to see. But some of that ink has transferred onto the surface of this piece of cardstock. So now here's an extra piece of cardstock I have, and I'm going to sprinkle some clear embossing powder onto these butterflies. Just really get the excess off. There we go. And I'm going to put this away. Get that off of the table there. Okay. So now I'm going to emboss, using the heat tool, those butterflies. And if you see any in places that you don't want it, you can brush it away. But it is a little bit difficult to see. Okay, so I'll start over here. But once it starts to heat up, you are able to see the shine. And if you're a little bit smarter than me, you'll use something like a clothespin or something to hold on to your cardstock so you don't burn yourself. Now what I really like about this is most of the areas are kind of, they have the embossing powder like right around the edges. Can you see that little bit of shine there? Okay. So the next step is going to be to grab some ink, and I'm going to use the turquoise sea ink and a sponge dauber. And I'm going to grab just a little extra piece of paper here to work on. And I'm going to ink that up. And I'm going to start rubbing this over the surface of these butterflies. And you can see that everywhere that there's embossing powder, it's not going to grab the ink. Even though I'm pressing down pretty hard, it's resisting the ink. This is really fun. And you can do this with more than one ink color. It would look pretty if you mixed blues and greens together, maybe added a little bit of purple. And you can really darken up the detail in the butterflies because they actually don't have any embossing powder on them. So you can really darken that up. And then, of course, I have to add a little something to this. So I have my Sakura Stardust pen. And what I'm going to do is add a little bit of glitter just to the raised areas of the butterfly. So I'm just going to draw right on top with a little bit of glitter. And for some reason, it's a little bit hard to see the shimmer from these pens on camera, but when you have them in person, there is so much sparkle with these pens. And if you don't have this, you can use the Wink of Stella pen, which also has lots of sparkle, or you can use something like a Quickie glue pen and some loose glitter, which also packs quite the sparkly punch. So I'm just running that right over the surface, and the glitter pen will not stick to the embossing powder. It'll just wipe right off. So if you get a little bit on there, once it dries, it'll just wipe right off. And I don't know if you can see that too well, but that's the way that shimmer is going to look. Now this piece is going to get mounted onto this black piece of cardstock. You can see it's actually using the embossing powder, the embossing folder backwards, because this way all of the images are protruding out from the cardstock, but this way it's more like letterpress and it's pressing inward. But instead of the ink getting pressed inward, the white spots are getting pressed inward. And then this whole panel is going to go on top of my white card base. You can see that that's really makes everything just kind of pop out. So that is the embossing technique. Now let me show you a finished card I made. I'm not going to show you all these details to do them in person. You've seen me do this kind of thing a million times. But what I did here was I just stamped one of the flowers from our Flower Builder stamp set, and I did that in the turquoise sea. I stamped it off once so it's a little bit lighter, and then I used the You're the Best greeting. And I added a little bit of our black ribbon and our plaid ribbon, and then I just made a little double looped bow using my fingers, and you've seen me do that before. And then I put that right on there with one of the dodes. I used that white pen that I picked up at the dollar section at Target to just add a little dot around each of the scallops. And I used all 4 of the circle dies, the layers, the inverted, the regular nesting, and then the scalloped circles to create that focal piece there with the greeting. So that is my finished card project, and that is a really fun technique. I hope you've enjoyed today's Stamp TV video. Stay tuned to Stamp TV for lots more inspiration coming up soon.